can't drive to this place. You can't catch a train. You can't simply just arrive. In an America of highways, satellites, and same-day delivery, there is still one place where letters are forced to travel by the hooves of a mule. There's a village in Arizona that most Americans have never even heard of. It sits tucked away at the bottom of a canyon, exactly 8 miles from the nearest paved road. To reach it, you have to hike 8 miles along a trail that drops deep into the earth, descending 2,000 feet, stepping across rock layers that have rested there for 500 million years. Or you put your life in the trust of a mule's back. This is Supai, the most remote community in the contiguous United States. Stay with us until the end of this video, because what has been built in the most invisible corner of America will completely change the way you see this canyon and the way you define one simple word: family. This village hasn't disappeared from the map. It is remote, quite simply because the modern world cannot impose its pace on this place. Those 8 miles of trail winding beneath the canyon walls aren't just a physical distance. They are a threshold dividing two worlds. Every step you take down into the earth is a step away from the rhythm of our era. The sound of engines fades, the honking of cars falls behind, and down there, silence finally begins to speak. Descending into this canyon feels like a journey backward through geological time. You're stepping across rock layers that existed long before the very concept of humanity. The deeper you go, the further the world above recedes. These 8 miles of trail are a test of perception. For the visitor, it's an exhausting physical challenge. But for the Havasupai people, this is simply the rhythm of everyday life. In other places, a letter disappears into a system of automated conveyor belts, barcodes, and dedicated trucks. But here, it travels down into the earth on the body heat of an animal. Since the 1930s, the United States Postal Service has continued to operate its most extraordinary mail route right here in Supai. Every weekday, a string of 10 to 22 mules carries sacks of mail and goods weighing up to 200 pounds, patiently making their way down into the canyon. 3 hours to head down, 5 hours to climb back up. In fact, many of the mules don't even need a handler. They know every twist of the trail by the scent of the earth, by the shape of the worn stones, and by a body memory built from thousands of repetitions. Those mule train mail postmarks may look like a quirky souvenir to the outside world. But for the village at the bottom of the canyon, the mule train embodies a much bigger question. Does slow always mean backward? And can a community truly connect with the modern world without being swallowed by that modernization? That connection actually started long before any mule ever carried a letter down here. It started with this water. The color you're seeing isn't an optical illusion, and it's not a camera trick. It's chemistry. The aquifer beneath the canyon filters through hundreds of feet of limestone, picking up huge amounts of calcium carbonate along the way. When that water finally rises to the surface and meets the sunlight, it produces a brilliant color that almost feels out of place in a parched desert. For visitors, this turquoise water is the perfect photograph. But for the people who live here, water is identity. Havasupai isn't some poetic title. It's a geographical fact. Havasupai means people of the blue-green water. The water doesn't just flow across the village's map. It flows through their history, through their memory, and right into the very name they call themselves. That is the biggest difference between simply admiring a land and truly belonging to it. Because long before this place became a wonder, long before this canyon ever had an English name, this water was already nurturing the people standing here 8 centuries ago. Archaeological evidence confirms they've been here for at least 800 years. But the oral histories say they were here long, long before that. Before America existed, before this canyon ever had an English name. Long before the Grand Canyon became a tourism icon, the Havasupai had mastered a perfect rhythm of seasonal migration. In the summer, they farmed corn, squash, and beans down on the shaded floor of the canyon. When winter cast its darkness and cold into the chasm, they moved up to the plateau above to hunt and gather. For them, land has never been just acreage or resources. It is the space for ceremony, the path of the seasons, the memory of their ancestors. The Grand Canyon was never an empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. It was a space that had already been lived in, named and loved across countless generations. But then, one of the most bitter paradoxes in the history of conservation took place. In 1882, the U.S. federal government established the Havasupai Reservation. Their traditional homeland of nearly 1 million acres was stripped away, shrunk down to just 518 acres at the bottom of the canyon. By 1919, the Grand Canyon was honored as a national park. To the rest of the world, that was a great triumph for protecting nature. But for the Havasupai, it was the final dispossession. The plateau above, where they had wintered and hunted for centuries, now became the property of the national park. For the next 56 years, the Havasupai were forbidden from setting foot on their ancestral land. A huge moral question was left hanging in the air. Can you really preserve a natural wonder by tearing out the roots of the very people who have become one with it? 1 million acres wasn't just land. It was winter. It was the hunting routes. It was the ceremonies. When all of that was reduced to 518 acres, what got shrunk wasn't only territory, it was an entire way of life. They could look up at their land every single day, but they could not walk on it. But they refused to become ghosts at the bottom of their own canyon. In 1974, a small delegation from the tribe made their way out of the canyon, crossed America, and arrived in Washington, D.C. They stood before Congress. They didn't come armed with economic figures. They testified about the spiritual meaning of a land that could not be separated from who they were. This time, America listened. In January of 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the Grand Canyon National Park Enlargement Act. The act returned approximately 185,000 acres of plateau land back to the tribe. It wasn't the full 1 million acres they had originally lost. And it shouldn't be seen as a gift from the government. It was a piece of justice being restored. The winter grazing lands, the ceremonial spaces, and the connection between the canyon and the plateau were stitched back together. For the Havasupai people, it was a new beginning. The plateau has come back, but life in Supai today is still framed by the absolute harshness of geography. Sitting at an elevation of 3,195 feet above sea level, Supai is the capital of the Havasupai Nation, with a population of only around 208 people. From the outside looking in, it's easy to list off all the things this place doesn't have. No fast food restaurants, no gas stations, no traffic lights. But a community isn't defined by the conveniences it lacks. It is defined by what it has stubbornly held on to. Remoteness always comes at a price. In Supai, anything that can't be grown in the ground or grazed in a field has to come down by mule's back, by helicopter, or by human strength. The cost of living is pushed up by the cost of transportation. But the steepest price this community pays isn't measured in money. It's measured in the coming of age of its children. Havasupai Elementary School, operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, BIE, only teaches students from kindergarten to 8th grade. There is no high school in Supai. For the children born here, 9th grade means a separation. 9th grade means packing their bags and heading off to boarding schools somewhere up on the plateau. For them, growing up isn't just about leaving home. It's about being uprooted from the entire landscape of their early life. The blue-green water, the trail, the canyon walls, and a community where everyone knows your name. They step into a world that moves faster, sounds louder, and feels completely foreign to the heartbeat of the canyon. A few years later, some will return, some will not. The most painful question facing Supai today is this: how does a community hold on to its soul when the next generation has to leave in order to grow up? The answer to that survival lies in this sound, the Havasupai language. The language of their ancestors is still being spoken in daily life, passed from the lips of the elders into the minds of the young. When an indigenous language survives, it isn't just about preserving a vocabulary. It preserves how a people name the water, how they remember the seasons, how they define their flesh and blood relationship with these canyon walls. There are lands that vanish from the map first, but there are also lands that only truly die when the language that names them is no longer being spoken. In Supai, that language is still alive, and it flows hand in hand with another powerful presence. About 2 miles downstream from the village, this is the reason people from every corner of the world are willing to hike 8 miles down a trail just to find it. A ribbon of turquoise water slicing across walls of red desert sandstone. 4 magnificent waterfalls, Navajo, Havasu, Mule, standing over 200 feet tall, and Beaver Falls. The visual contrast between water and rock here is so sharp, so absolute, and so overwhelming that the human eye doesn't quite know what to do with it, except plant your feet and stare. In the language of journalism and tourism, people love to throw around phrases like a forgotten paradise, a hidden gem, or a place no one knows about. But the danger of these labels is that they completely erase history. Supai has never been a hidden paradise to the people who belong to it. A place isn't invisible just because the outside world hasn't seen it on Instagram yet. To the outside world, this waterfall is an extraordinary adventure, a checkmark on the list of places you have to see before you die. But for the Havasupai, the waterfall doesn't belong to a camera lens. It belongs to their homeland. We come here for a few days to experience an unreal kind of beauty. They stay and carry the full weight of the harsh reality behind that beauty. To experience a place is a privilege, but to live fully with it is a responsibility. When night begins to fall over the floor of the canyon and the last tour groups have retreated to their campsites, Supai gives back something the modern world lost a long time ago: the complete absence of noise. In the cities out there, the sound of engines, of traffic, of industrial machines forms such a thick wall of background noise that we no longer even notice its presence. But down here at the bottom of this canyon, silence isn't an empty space. It's a presence. That stillness forces you to listen to yourself again and to hear the heartbeat of these half-billion-year-old canyon walls wrapping around you. And inside that stillness, you come face to face with the deepest truth about the relationship between people and a land. The Havasupai people have an idea that's very hard to translate into modern language. It doesn't carry the meaning of ownership, management, or extraction the way our legal systems define them. It's much closer to kinship by blood. They don't see themselves as the owners of the canyon. They belong to the canyon. The water doesn't just run past where they live, it runs through their history. The canyon walls aren't a backdrop, they are identity. This sense of belonging is rooted so deeply that centuries of displacement, decades of land being stripped away, and even the temptations of the comfortable world above could not pull them out of the bottom of this canyon. That is why people who have walked down into Supai often describe the same strange feeling on the journey back up. As the sound of the stream grows fainter and then disappears, as the canyon walls open up to make room for the wide open sky of the modern world, what they feel isn't just relief after a body-draining hike. What they feel is closer to a sense of loss. The hollow feeling of having just left a place they seem to have always been searching for, without even knowing they were looking. When you step out of the Red Canyon, you're forced to face a haunting question. Did you just leave a remote and spectacular land? Or did you just leave the very way of life that our modern world has already lost? 8 miles of trail is a physical distance you can measure, but the greatest distance isn't between Supai and the outside world. It's between the way we understand a place and the way the Havasupai belong to that place. Home isn't the place the world can easily reach. Home is the place that recognized you long before you knew what to call it. So, if you had to leave behind every familiar comfort in exchange for a place you truly belong to, would you be ready to make that trade? Let me know your answer down in the comments. We read every single one.